Well, hello, Gold Derby. I'm Daniel Montgomery here with Chris Beachum and Paul Sheehan, and we're going to talk about the Emmy nominations. We're going to start with the Best Drama Series category and the four top drama acting categories. And of course, there are big differences in Emmy voting this year. Including the nominations, there are going to be at least 7 nominees for Best Drama Series, potentially more if the 2% rule comes into play with those seventh, eighth, and ninth place finishers. So let's start with best drama series. I mean, I think there are a few nominees who most of us are more or less agreed upon. Chris, let's start with you. What would you say are our locks in this category?
Well, I think your 4 shows from last year, Game of Thrones, Downton Abbey, House of Cards, and the 4-time winner in this category, Mad Men. You've got 2 shows leaving out. Breaking Bad won the past 2 years, but it's gone, and True Detective should have never been in that category anyway, and it's gone. And like you said, though, there is a 7th slot at least, so I think Orange is the New Black makes the move over pretty easily, making that 5, but that still leaves us with 2 open slots.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you look at Gold Derby and you see, well, who each of our constituencies, whether it's experts, editors like all of us, our top 24 users from last year that did really well predicting the nominations and who they think is going to be predicted this year, and then the users, every group has sort of different shows in the mix. But I think that, a lot of people are fans of Empire. I just, that there's one that, is it too much of a soap? Is it too much like, I mean, they reference Dynasty from back in the 80s. Is that serious enough fare to get a drama series nomination? I'm not sure when you've got other shows like The Americans, like the Breaking Bad spinoff Better Call Saul, like The Good Wife, all jockeying. I don't know, Daniel, do you think Empire's going to be one of those 7 nominees?
I do. I agree with Chris on those top 5, and Empire I have in my number 6 slot. I agree with you, Paul, that it's not the kind of show that the Emmys usually go for, but I think it's the kind of show that they'll nominate this year anyway, just because it's sort of too big to ignore. It's the big broadcast savior hit. Shows like this don't come around very often. The kinds of shows that build audience every week that are just bona fide blockbuster hits. So I think it'll get the nomination, even if it's the kind of thing that Emmy voters don't usually go for. I mean, Grey's Anatomy was also a soap opera that the Emmys don't usually go for, and that had a couple of years where it was the biggest thing on TV. Heroes, the comic books show, got in one year because it was the big show that year. I think Empire gets in on the strength of that. I think it's the kind of show where we could see it get in this year and then potentially never again.
That's why I have it in there. Also, sometimes I look at, especially if I've got a slot that I'm not quite sure on, I kind of look at it backwards. I think about, okay, what show or shows out of the group that I'm considering is going to get like a lot of nominations, because that usually means it's got cross appeal among many branches. And I think I would be very surprised if Empire doesn't come away with in that 8, 9, 10 range, because it's going to probably get at least, let's say, 2 or 3 acting slots. I don't know that it gets into writing, but maybe directing with Lee Daniels. And then certainly something like a costume design or a sound editing, maybe even like an original song. I think it could get into that 7, 8, 9, 10 range, and that's why I think it'll get into series.
Well, then, so does that logic apply to The Good Wife? Does it get back in, or is it?
The Good Wife, to me, might get several nominations, but they'll all be acting.
Right.
It hardly ever gets anything else.
Right.
That's the interesting thing about Empire. I think you mentioned the music categories. I mean, it could sweep the original song category. I could see it getting 2 or 3, nominations in that category alone. And then there's a separate music direction category that a lot of musical dramas get into, and a lot of special musical episodes get into. The Buffy musical got into that category, and so those alone, you're going to have close to a handful of nominations, and before you get to acting and potentially best series.
So then, Chris, you mentioned Breaking Bad having won for the last couple of years. What about Better Call Saul? I mean, that's certainly floating around in our top 10 on the various charts. Is that getting nominated?
Yeah, I think if it did, it would be residual effect from Breaking Bad more than. I don't know that there was universal acclaim and appeal for it, other than Bob Odenkirk and some aspects of it. I really could see it getting in. The seventh slot this year really throws us for a loop in that we don't know. We don't know how that's going to impact. It's something we haven't been able to track, and
Right.
ask us in 3 or 4 years, about certain shows in that position. But I don't think it's going to come loaded down with nominations overall. I don't think so.
What about you, Daniel?
Yeah, I'm skeptical. It does have the residual love from Breaking Bad, but I feel like that's a double-edged sword. Because Better Call Saul is such a minor show, which is not an insult to the quality of the show, but just in terms of the subject matter, it doesn't have that Shakespearean tragedy feel to it like Breaking Bad did, especially towards the end of its run. It's very much this struggling lawyer trying to get by and trying to get over. And we know he's going to become, he's going to interact, later on in his life with, Walter White and Jesse Pinkman and all those people. But the first season, it feels like such a small-scale show. Like, I can definitely see Odenkirk getting in and Banks getting in and even winning. But I feel like it's not a drama series nominee. And that's not saying it's not possible, but it just doesn't feel right to me.
And when I reference the different charts, what I think one that's very interesting is the Americans, very solidly backed by our experts, and certainly the TV critics like it, those awards. But the Emmys have never embraced it. And I mean, does this seventh slot mean that it's finally going to get a drama series nomination, Chris? You're a big fan of that show.
These kind of shows always trip me up when they suddenly, not suddenly, but when they have all the acclaim in the world, and you would think they would be getting it in several nomination slots. I've got it in sixth place, mainly off of that Critics' Choice win, but I just, sometimes you just wonder if you're buying into something just because you want it to happen, and I think the seventh slot does help it. Correct me if I'm wrong. Has it had barely any nominations at all over the year? I mean, I know Margot Martindale, but what else has it gotten, Daniel? Anything?
It got one other nomination. I believe it was either main title design or main title theme music in its first year, and that's it.
It's the opposite of what we just said about Empire. If you don't have support among several branches, you're probably not getting into series.
Right.
So maybe I'm wrong here. The other ones that I'm looking at, you mentioned Good Wife earlier, although it's so hard for a show to come back after it's been kicked out. The Affair just won the Golden Globe for a first-year show. Those are also hard to predict because you just don't. At least on the other shows, you have some kind of reference point. The Americans, we have a very bad reference point from the past two seasons. Outlander it could be one of those that gets a lot of technical nominations. So does it have that kind of support? It's certainly Star's best chance to get in there. And then Homeland, does it make a comeback? People were raving about its fourth season.
That's right. And just as a reminder to myself and everyone else, I mean, when it comes to the series, I mean, that's everyone in the TV Academy gets to be part of that nomination process, right? Like that.
That's right.
Comedy series, drama series, for these big program awards. And that's
and the technical branches, which I think those very much can influence what happens there.
Yeah. So if maybe we could shift then just to the acting and.
First of all, what do you both have in those two slots? I've got Americans and Empire.
I've got Empire, and I've actually got Homeland coming back in there. I think 1 year off. I think they'll give it the nod again for the rebound.
And I had Americans and Good Wife, but now I'm dropping Good Wife and putting Empire in based on this conversation. So, and I will keep changing my mind right up until about 5 minutes before nominations are announced next Thursday at a much more pleasant time of 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. So with the acting awards, now that's only the actors branch, like with the Oscars. So it's the acting branch is going to be the ones that are responsible for those nominees. And I think the hottest race in the whole shebang is drama actress, and I think we've got a few nominees in there. I think including maybe there seems to be a consensus building around who the winner is, which would be a historic win. Viola Davis would be the first African American to ever win this category. But she's got some real competition, doesn't she, Daniel?
Yeah, she's got a competition for that very title. I mean, Taraji P. Henson, we talked about Empire. I think even more likely than Empire getting to Best Drama Series, if it only gets one nomination, it's almost certain, I would think, to be Taraji P. Henson for Best Drama Actress. I mean, she was just the breakout star of that show and of the year. And it's the kind of over-the-top performance that that often wins these sorts of things. So I think she's definitely a major threat, assuming she gets nominated, which she probably will. But it's hard to tell with this category.
And then we've got some other, just looking at our charts. So and they're both from freshman shows. There's Robin Wright, who everyone thought was going to win last year, and I guess it comes down to it's the episode stupid. That she picked the wrong episode. And then we've got a couple of other people that have won. Juliana Margulies, Claire Danes. I mean, of those names I've just said, Chris, I mean, which ones would you say are locks to be nominated?
I think there's one lock in this category to actually be nominated, and that's Robin Wright. I say that based off of, like we talked about on series, when you've got a first-year show, I don't know that you can ever say lock. I mean, you don't know how it's going to be embraced. I mean, Viola Davis could be the only nomination for her series, even though she's probably as close to a lock. Empire, we think it's going to be embraced pretty well, but, and I think Henson could even win the category. Then you get to, I mean, aren't all 6 people from last year eligible this year? So right there, we've just knocked out at least 2 of last year's nominees. And I think most of us are pretty comfortable saying maybe a Lizzie Kaplan and maybe a Michelle Dockery aren't coming back. So that could be those 2 slots. Claire Danes seems to have the love of the Emmy voters and Globes and SAG and so forth. So I think she's probably pretty safe. I don't know that Juliana's safe, and the only reason I say that is 2 years ago we all thought she might win again, and she wasn't even nominated. So,
well, I just published. I didn't write it. Halal Haddad did a fascinating look at the Emmy ballot and the alphabet, and how people at the top of the alphabet, like Lizzie Kaplan, like Michelle Dockery, that ballot has a long list of names in alphabetic order by your last name. And they got nominations. Juliana Margulies with an M, the second half of the alphabet, didn't get nominated one year. So I don't know. It made me think, like, okay, I can take Kerry Washington off my list, with her W. I think
on a category like this, and there's not many categories like this for this cycle, when there are so many people that voters want to give their love and support to, I think it hurts sometimes the most logical other candidates for 2 reasons. One is they think, well, I've nominated them before, I've marked them before, they know how I feel, but also they think, oh, well, I'll mark Ruth Wilson, or I'll mark Vera Farmiga, or whoever it might be, because Juliana will be safe, other people will get her. I think that's what happened 2 years ago. I really do. Right,
because that was a very strong season. So, all right, well then, okay, now I'm really confused. And this is the only point of me being in these Slugfests is to find out what I should predict. So
I've only got 2 people returning from last year on that one. I've got Robin and I've got Claire. And then I've got Viola and Taraji. I think they're pretty safe. And right now, I've got Ruth Wilson and Vera Farmiga.
Again, looking at our combined chart, I guess it's 6. The 2% rule could apply to all these categories too, though, couldn't it, Daniel? Am I wrong on that? I'm wrong on so many things.
Yeah, I think the 2% rule could kick in here. We had 7 nominees for Best Drama Actress, I think just 2 years ago, so it's
right. Yeah.
for that to happen in any acting category.
So
I never predict for that.
okay, so I'm going to mention a name and transition, if we could, into drama actor. So Elizabeth Moss, how surprised would you be to see her get nominated, Chris? Elizabeth Moss.
In this field, I would be a little surprised. I think
okay.
She was so smart early on in determining where she should fall, and late. I think this year, if she had gone supporting, she could have won.
Okay, so given that, how surprised will you be to see Jon Hamm not nominated then? Like, in other words, are you fully expecting Jon Hamm to be nominated?
It's such a weak field, and I don't say that in terms of the quality of the people or the performances. I say it more just the way things kind of are falling this year. You've got, what is it, 3 open slots?
Mm-hmm.
It's just the opposite of the drama actress. So I would say Kevin Spacey and Jon Hamm are very safe. But after that, I mean, I almost feel like Jeff Daniels' slot is open. Even though he won a couple of years ago, the show aired so long ago, and it was a shortened season, and it's, it was canceled. And I think that's an open slot. So I think you're going to see 2 returning from last year's 6, and then 4 newcomers. And
so who do you think is sort of in the strongest of the rookies then?
I'm not sold on these, but I've got Bob Odenkirk, I've got Terrence Howard, I've got Clive Owen, and I've got Matthew Rhys.
Okay. And Daniel?
I actually slightly disagree. I think if this had been a stronger year, we'd see Jeff Daniels fall out. I think he is still vulnerable, but given that we're losing 3 of last year's nominees, and the field is opening up already, I'm just sort of predicting him to get back in by default with Hamm and Spacey. And then I've also got Odenkirk, but then I've got Kyle Chandler in Bloodline, just because, he has history with the TV Academy, they like him. And I've got Clive Owen in the Nick, for that our name check.
Right. I think I must have copied your predictions, because that's who I have. And yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Isn't it nice? I mean, this is why these women are coming to television too. These people that could be making movies. When you talk about that rich field on the for women, and compared to, say, Best Actress at the Oscars. So I think we should. So that's interesting. And then is it really Hamm versus Spacey for the win, Chris? Just to put you on the spot on that, because everyone wants to know: is the Mad Men curse going to be ended? And it's the last chance.
Well, that's going to be something everyone with at the end of July and August when we're making these predictions. We all look back at history, and I'm very tempted to predict both Jon Hamm and Christina Hendricks to win because they've got the episodes, but logic and history tells you they're not.
But they also have to submit those episodes. As I said about Robin Wright, she had the episode to win, but that was not the one she submitted.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, Chris, will be working those phones in the hours and days after nominations, getting us those titles, and that's the all-important factor, isn't it? One episode is sort of your submission. That's what the voters will be watching. And then, of course, what we haven't mentioned is Daniel talked about the nomination process changing, but the winning, the voting in the second round is changing too, and that it opens up to anyone that attests that they have watched. If you could take part in the nomination process, you can take part in the final round. So if you're an actor and say, oh yes, I did watch all 6 nominees in drama actor, you're allowed to vote. So we could see it turning into a bit of a popularity contest.
And my question will be, and again, it's going to take us years to figure out what is the trend here, how is this impacting. But let's just say everybody does watch. But you've now got, instead of what's typically been an acting panel might be 75 people, let's say you've now got 500 people.
Mm-hmm.
Just the sheer fact that, let's say they all watch, they not just signed the affidavit, but they actually watched, just the sheer fact that 5 times the number of people vote, it's going to turn it into more of a popularity contest, I think. All you need is a certain number that go, well, this guy had the best episode, but Jon Hamm's never won before. Or this, I love Kevin Spacey, he's never won for this role, or whatever. And if you get enough of those, episodes don't matter as much. We don't know.
Right. I think I mean, not to tub some for Gold Derby too much. I think we play part of that narrative. I mean, I think back to you doing that interview with Bob Newhart for his guest stint on Big Bang, and you know we really highlighted the fact that he never won. A few years ago when we talked about Anne Margaret never having won. I mean, these people won, and I think because suddenly people went, oh, really? Bob? I mean, I think if you asked most TV Academy members, they would have thought Bob Newhart had 3 or 4 Emmys from over the years. So it'd be very interesting to see how much the John Hamm never having won narrative takes hold. So he just needs to come and do a webcam with us.
Come do a chat with us. That's right. We'd be glad to pound that in the ground like we did with Bob.
Yeah. So now on the supporting side, I've just clicked on drama supporting actors. So why don't we talk about that? In terms of locks, I mean, it looks like looking at our Gold Derby charts, the only one who seems like a lock, and that's probably because of the show he stars in, is Peter Dinklage for Game of Thrones. I mean, that's the one that's got an overwhelming amount of support across the board. And after that, it seems like it's a real mix of people. So who do you see as for certain should rouse themselves out of bed at 8:30 in the morning next Thursday to hear their name announced, Daniel? Who for this category, supporting actor?
I agree. Peter Dinklage is probably a lock. I'd say that the nominees, the top few nominees, are safe category than maybe some others. I'd say Mandy Patinkin is probably pretty safe. And Jonathan Banks is probably pretty safe for a nomination. After that, I can't say I'm overly confident. I'm predicting Jim Carter again. And then after that, I have 2 nominees who could easily not be nominated. Ben Mendelsohn in Bloodline and Michael Kelly in House of Cards.
Okay.
I don't agree on a lot of those. I've got Jonathan Banks in first. I got Peter Dinklage in second. And I've got Mandy Patinkin in fifth. At some point on any given show, the support just starts dropping tremendously. Even if the series is good, the season is good, and I just don't know where Homeland stands at this point. I put last year's guest winner Joe Morton in. I think at least we know they like him a lot, and he qualifies here in supporting this year. I brought back Walton Goggins. I'm not positive on it, but he was basically a lead this season. It was a showdown between him and Timothy Oliphant, and we've seen them nominate him before, although it was years ago. The other thing about him is he's in a lot of projects these days. I mean, he's working with Spielberg and Quentin Tarantino, and I mean, he's really got a high profile. And I also have Michael Kelly, and Michael Kelly, if voters only watch, say, 1 or 2 episodes, the first couple of episodes, he dominates the first episode of the season. Way more than Kevin Spacey or Robin Wright. So that's why I'm wondering if maybe he gets in, and he dominates the finale if they watch that. I think Jon Voight was more of a one-year kind of a thing, a former Oscar winner. Nobody's watching that show. Jim Carter I haven't predicted yet, and he gets in every year, so he ought to be thanking me for not predicting him. And Ben Mendelsohn, just like I don't have Kyle Chandler in. I mean, once it's 2 weeks had passed, nobody has mentioned it since other than people on our website. So I just don't know that it's going to get anything.
Isn't that interesting how with Netflix and streaming and how it kind of has a burst? And I guess House of Cards has the pedigree of Kevin Spacey, David Fincher, to keep it sustained. That it's a shame because I think Ben Mendelsohn is really wonderful in it, but I'm with you. I don't have him being nominated, and I dithered about Jon Voight and bounced him, but I personally would love to see Jim Carter nominated again. I think it would be. I think he had a really strong storyline this year. So, and then just to shift gears over to the drama supporting actress. So you were talking about Jim Carter may or may not be nominated for Downton, and yet Maggie Smith. I mean, boy, overwhelmingly the front runner to win. And again, Julian Fellows gave her strong storylines. Didn't you think, Chris, for Downton? You're a big fan of that show. Yeah,
she won this year. I couldn't dispute that win, other than Marcus's, uproar that she's not going to be there. I've actually got Maggie and Joanne Froggatt. I think Joanne didn't have as good a season as the year before, but she still had strong material. and there seems to be a real love for her. And we see that when, like when we did the chat with her a couple of weeks ago, her fans, and I know they're not Emmy voters, but I mean, there's a real love for her and this character. So I could see her getting back in. In fact, I just moved her in and bumped out Christine Baranski. Again, I don't know if The Good Wife is. I think it may really fall off in nominations this year. So my top slot, though, I had Maggie Smith in first forever based on the season.
Right.
But then that finale Lena Headey had on Game of Thrones, I moved her into first. I think she's going to have the episode.
Wouldn't that be great, Daniel? I mean, like, 'cause it's sort of a popcorn show in that, we've written about the bias against these genre shows. I'd be thrilled for Lena Headey because I think she's doing really good work, good acting in a show where there's so much else going on.
And it is we know they embrace the actors. At least they did for Peter Dinklage in year one when most of us weren't really expecting it. I think Lena Headey's episode is better than the one Dinklage won for in season one. It's certainly more dramatic and memorable from her storyline standpoint. She was nominated last year when she didn't have quite as much material and her submission wasn't quite as strong. This year she has it, and I think really if it goes more like a popular vote combined with the effects of the tape of the submission episode, I really think that helps Headey and Smith. I really don't. Anyone else who that combination of factors really works in their favor as much with this year.
Now, Chris, you mentioned Baranski maybe falling out, but maybe Christina Hendricks, a perennial nominee for Mad Men, maybe even winning, depending on the episode submission. What I'm really curious about is, with this Orange is the New Black being reclassified as a drama, how many, if any, of those women are going to make it in to this category? This is almost as competitive as lead actress in a drama series, I think, looking down the list.
This is the case on so many drama, comedy, and movie this year. The women are just killing it, and the men, I can't hardly find 6 people. But I think, that combination of popularity and, have the episode. I've got Lorraine Toussaint and Uzo Aduba getting in. I think Kate Mulgrew has enough of a career that could push her into another slot again. And we saw Orange take 3 guest acting actress slots last year, so we know they can do it. We know they could take half this category. For a long time, I had Sissy Spacek in. Again, I took all the Bloodline people out. I just don't hear anybody talking about it. I think among of the 6 that I mentioned that I have in, and the 3 or 4 we talked about, I think that's basically the 10 that I think have the best shot.
Right. It's confusing. And I'm with you on. I would have loved Sissy Spacek to be nominated, and I think she's doing great work, and it's nice to see these women of a certain age get really nice meaty roles. Thank you, Netflix. And when we shift over to talking about comedy on the next Slugfest, we can talk about Jane Fonda versus Lily Tomlin. But
well, I'm glad you said Jane Fonda here. I mean, she's gotten in both years in the guest category for Newsroom. She might slide in here. I'm just looking down the list here of other people, and there's about
and explain why we're suddenly talking about her in this category, Chris.
Well, they changed. That's another rule they changed on if you appear in half of your season's episodes or more, then you have to go into supporting. Well, I guess you could go into lead, but you can't be guest. And she was the Newsroom only had 6 episodes, and she was in 4 of them. And I think 1 was more of a cameo. I think if they had known the rule change, they would have just removed that cameo from that episode. Well, no, that wouldn't have helped though, because she would have been. No, maybe she was in 3 out of 6. I think
she was in 3. She was in
3. But anyway, supporting. I think she could slide in here. Another name that you just never discount. There's certain people at the Oscars or certain people at the Emmys. If somebody from the Mary Tyler Moore Show is on the ballot for the Emmys, you always at least consider the fact that they might get nominated, like Ed Asner this year on The Good Wife. There's another person that you never discount, and that's Alfre Woodard, who I don't know the number now, but she's been nominated for like 17 different roles.
Yep.
at the Emmys.
Yeah, I wrote about
one
it.
of the worst shows of the season, but she's on the ballot, and for State of Affairs, as the President of the United States, no less. That's the kind of person that could just get a slot.
Yeah, yeah, I remember the Desperate Housewives nomination really shocked us. But yeah, and the fact that her versatility to be nominated across all these different categories. But so it's interesting. There's a W. Woodard. So we'll have to see which we can come up with all kinds of theories after the fact as to why this person or that person got nominated. But well, that's listen. I mean, as I said, the point of these Slugfests is to help me fill out my predictions. So I thank you guys for drama, and I think we're going to talk about comedy at another time, right? So look for that.
Look for our Slugfest on comedy. It'll also be posted.
Yeah.